Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Padujikacharya Ashtotar the Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Padujikacharya Ashtotar the Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavindra Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Yeah. Give me a second here. Nārāyana namaskritya Narang chaiva narottamam Devim saraswatim vyasam Tato jayamudīrayet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and to Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta prayesha bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavatyuttama shloke bhakti bhavati naistiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service unto the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On his 21st day of July 2021 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We are in Canto 5, the Creative Impetus. Chapter 1, the activities of Maharaj Priyavrata. text number 21. So it is prose, so I'll just read it through and then I'll read the translation. Bhagavan api manona yatavad upakalpita pichati Priyavrata Nāradayor avishamam abhisangmikshamanayor atmasam avasthanam avanmanasam chayam avyavritam pravartayan agamat. Lord Brahma was then worshipped by Manu, that's Swayambhuva Manu, who respectfully satisfied him as well as he could. Priyavrata and Nārada also looked upon Brahma with no tinges of resentment. Having engaged Priyavrata in accepting his father's request, Lord Brahma returned to his abode, Satyaloka, which is indescribable by the endeavor of mundane mind or words. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Manu was certainly very satisfied that Lord Brahma had persuaded his son Priyavrata to take the responsibility for ruling the world. Priyavrata and Nārada were also very satisfied. Although Brahma had forced Priyavrata to accept the management of worldly affairs, thus breaking his vow to remain brahmacārī and completely engage in devotional service, Nārada and Priyavrata did not look upon Brahma with resentment. Nārada was not at all sorry that he had been frustrated in making Priyavrata a disciple. Both Priyavrata and Nārada were exalted personalities who knew how to respect Lord Brahma. Therefore, instead of looking upon Brahma with resentment, they very feelingly offered him their respect. Lord Brahma then returned to his celestial abode, known as Satyaloka, which is described here as being impeccable and being unapproachable by words. It is stated in this verse that Lord Brahma returned to his residence, which is as important as his own personality. Lord Brahma is the creator of this universe and the most exalted personality within it. His lifetime is described in the Bhagavad Gita 8:17. Sahasra yuga paryantam ahar yad brahmano viduhu. The total duration of the 4 yugas is 4,300,000 years. And when that is multiplied by 1,000 times, it equals 12 hours in the life of Brahma. Therefore, we cannot factually comprehend even 12 hours of Brahma's life, to say nothing of the 100 years that constitute his entire lifetime. How then can we understand his abode? The Vedic literatures describe that in Satyaloka there is no birth, death, old age, or disease. In other words, since Satyaloka is situated next to Brahmaloka, or the Brahman effulgence, it is almost as good as Vaikuntha-loka. Lord Brahma's abode is practically indescribable from our present status. Therefore, it has been described as avan manasa gochara, this is in the verse, or beyond the description of our words and the imagination of our minds. Srimad Bhagavatam 2:26-27 thus describes the abode of Lord Brahma. And this is a misprint here. Yad dvai parardham, 2 parardas. Yad dvai parardham tad uparameshyam na yatra soko najada namrityur nati nachod vega. In Satyaloka, which is situated many millions and billions of years away, there is no lamentation, nor is there old age, death, anxiety, or the influence of enemies. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So, when I first read this, I said, well, that's puzzling. Because I immediately remembered how Brahma came down to bless Hiranyakashipu, or let's say he came down in order to end his austerities, which were tormenting the universe. And in the course of that, he sprinkled his kamandalu water on on Hiranyakashipu, and Hiranyakashipu came out of this little anthill that had grown around his body since he was standing on his tiptoes for thousands of years and performing such austerity that he was burning the universe with the tejas that was coming from his head. So, Hiranyakashipu's main purpose, of course, was to become immortal. That was the boon that he wanted. And he immediately asked that. It's interesting if you read those prayers that he offered to Brahma. He addresses him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's conflating. He doesn't want to think about Vishnu, his arch enemy. He thinks he's struck pay dirt now with Brahma. And he keeps addressing him that, and then he asks him for a boon. And the boon that he wants, of course, is immortality. And Brahma said, well, I can't give you immortality because I don't have immortality. I also die eventually. And then, eventually he gave him all kinds of boons that, in Hiranyakashipu's mind, seemed to equal immortality. I won't be killed in the day, I won't be killed in the night, I won't be killed by anyone you create, I won't be killed by anyone you haven't created, on and on like that, But of course he was killed by Lord Nrsingadev, who satisfied all of those conditions. But what got me puzzled was how Brahma pleaded, well, I'm not immortal. Well, if that doesn't mean he dies, what does it mean? And here we read that there's no, right in the Bhagavatam, na mrityur narti in the Chodvega, there's no old age, there's no death, there's no misery, there's no like that. So how does that work? And what about all the other residents in Brahmaloka? Now it's understood that their lifetime is like Brahma's. And the actual number, when you multiply all this out, is an inconceivable number of 311 trillion 40 billion years. And our Brahma is the youngest, is the Brahma who lives the shortest, because he's only got 4 heads. There are Brahmas with many more heads, and they live longer and so forth. So that's beyond inconceivable. I mean, it's no point in trying to conceive what that means. But it's not eternity. It's a long, long time, but it's not eternity. So what I understand from this is that there's no death as we know it, but there's obviously a termination point, and that comes with the whole destruction of Brahmaloka. At the time of the annihilation. There's an annihilation when Brahma dies. There's a little annihilation when he takes rest, and everything is destroyed up to Brahmaloka, if I understand it correctly. And then there's a whole lot of, he has to again manifest all the praja, has to come out. It's quite a duty he has. So, so that's part of what's being explained here, is the amazing quality of Satyaloka itself, of Brahmaloka is a place, which it says here is as important as he himself. Just as we find in the description of Krishna's pastimes, of Krishna's personality, that his abode is equally transcendental. In fact, that famous verse, Arajo Bhagavan Vrajeshitanayas Tadhama Vrindavanam, that Lord Chaitanya taught worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavan Vrajeshitanayas, who is the son of the king of Braja. That's the supreme form of the Lord. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. And the worship of his Dham, of his Vrindavan Dham, which is an integral part of his pastimes and so forth. So, one thing that comes out in this purport is, and this is what I'd like to emphasize here, how the authority of Brahma, which was accepted by all the disputing parties, but you had a difference of opinion here that was kind of a critical situation, where the universe needed to be managed, and Priyavrata was the only one who could do it. But Priyavrata had already renounced, he had been initiated, he'd been taught by Nārada Muni, and he wasn't into it. He was doing his bhajan, and he wanted to, as Prabhupada mentions here, remain brahmacārī. It's understood he had to get married to do all this, because that's part of the scene of being the president or the leader of the universe. So he first resisted that, and he wasn't going to just follow his father, because he had Nārada Muni's instruction that he was following. But when his grandfather came down, Brahma, who was also the super spiritual master and the father of Nārada Muni, he had the full authority. And it's interesting to show the reaction right in the verse. Priyavrata Nārada also looked upon Brahma with no tinges of resentment. Even though Nārada lost his prime disciple there, and his order was contravened, and Priyavrata had to give up his position, renunciation, and take on all of this management, he was assured this is very key, he was assured by Brahma that he would maintain his Krishna consciousness. That it's not necessarily so, true, that if you're involved in material affairs, your consciousness has to be material. And this is proved in more modern ages by the famous example of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who had a very responsible job as a minister, who was dealing with all kinds of judgments that had to do with mundane affairs. You know, he had 10 children, but he was Mahabhagavat. He's often sometimes called the seventh Goswami. You know, Gaura Das Babaji, who was renunciation personified, he gave up his wandering in Vrindavan, came all the way down to Puri to hear from Mayapur, in order to hear from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, accept him as the Shiksha Guru. That's why he's there in the Parampara. Not as Diksha, but as Shiksha Guru. So Priyavrata was assured, he was so fixed that he would not be affected. He would not lose, his consciousness would not be polluted by engaging in all these activities. So this is an important lesson that I think is being brought here, is that especially, under the direct order of the spiritual master, in this case the most exalted spiritual personality in this pastime, one can be empowered and one can be assured that he can perform a service that seems to be impossible, or seems to be something that's going to ruin your consciousness, but it won't, if you follow the instructions and you maintain your position nicely and you're strong enough. And Priyavrata certainly was at this point. So that's one of the lessons from this pastime. And then this description of Satyaloka, this Avan Manasa Gotra. I remember this phrase is one of the first we learned. Some that stick out, Aham Brahmasmi, and then Van Manasa Gotra. Somehow that was it. What it means is, Van means words, Manasa means mind, Gotra means purview, or being able to grasp, and the prefix makes it that you can't understand, you can't grasp with your material mind and words these transcendental matters. And this is a very important understanding, and accept that. Then the next question is, well, how can we know of them? How can we come to understand them? And that is by submissive oral reception and taking the words of the authorities, Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu. These are our three pillars of evidence, what we call pramana. Pramana are those things which provide us with instruction and knowledge that we often have to take on faith, because it's beyond our ability to know otherwise. And when we're ready to do that, that's really when we can begin to make advancement. Because when we have to, it's not just that we're getting so much knowledge, but we put it to practice. Putting it into practice. Here is this, the Hare Krishna mantra and its potencies is completely Avan Manasa Gotra. To many people, it's just that silly chant they've been chanting since the 60s. Haven't they got over it yet? I don't know what people think. But in one sense, I remember when we used to do regular Harinams, and you read the history of how when the Harinams first came, like in places like Australia, there was a lot of opposition. They even got arrested. And I remember back in Miami, we used to go out. We used to go up to Fort Lauderdale when they had the retreats there. What do they call them? In the spring break. So everyone in the East Coast used to go down there to Fort Lauderdale. Big crowds. Drinking all the time. We'd be walking up on the beach, and we get, Abhishek with the beer. They pour it off the. And so there was a lot of opposition, misunderstanding. In certain parts. Now, of course, in some places there was welcome. Like you watch the this series that was produced by Yadavar and Vishaka way back, the Following Srila Prabhupada. It's like, 12 or so DVDs. And my favorite is 1970 Ratha Yatra. 1970 Ratha Yatra. And it's described there. What's really great about it is that you have because he did this early on when many of the principals were around and they could narrate and tell what's going on. So you have, there's Brahmananda getting in on it, and others who are, announcing or telling you what's happening. So they're describing this Rath Yatra in San Francisco in 1970. It was the biggest festival in ISKCON. There was no big Mayapur festival yet. There were no other Rath Yatras. It was just San Francisco. And so all devotees streamed in from all parts of the United States and even Canada. They came down, so it was a big thing. And it was still the height of the hippie days. I mean, the big height was 67, the Summer of Love, But 70, it went into thousands of people, Golden Gate Park. And you hear how it was also the time of the Black Panthers. And they had claimed that park, Golden Gate Park, as part of their territory. So there was some threats. They probably shouldn't go because it could be a rumble. And the Prabhupada said, no way. He didn't say it like that. He says, there's no question of not going to the Rath Yatra. So they drove him slowly to the Rath Yatra. And so he joined the Rath Yatra after the initial first part of it. And it shows, this is the most amazing thing. He gets out, offers obeisances to the deities, and then he gets up and his kirtan and he starts dancing. It's right there in the video. I don't know, anything. And he's wearing this amazing, it's not purple, but it's a little, not the usual color. Huh? It was a little large. But he said, you get it for me and you'll dress, I'll wear it, So Bhavananda, he was into that, So he's dancing like that, and all these thousands of people are watching, And so it was a amazingly moving thing to see this. So there were places where, of course, the chanting was being accepted. But what I'm getting at is that accepting Srila Prabhupada's desire. Another one describes how reluctant they were to go on the very first Harinam, not the first one that Prabhupada led, but the first one without Prabhupada, where they're just going up and down the street. And the devotees were saying, oh my God, Actually, the first one, they went to the west side. I don't know if you know Manhattan, but Greenwich Village. But there you had police, because that was where wealthy people lived. Tompkins Square Park was where the poor Polish immigrants lived, And so there you could just sit there and on the grass and chant. But the first one, Prabhupada led them. And you hear some of the the accounts says we were very reluctant to go out in public. We're going out in public to do this and they got some cat calls here and there But on Prabhupada's instruction they did it. This is the point, is that when you have someone who's absolutely the supreme authority, in this case Brahma, and throughout ISKCON until to this very day, Srila Prabhupada, of course, then he can resolve all kinds of differences of opinion and all kinds of reluctance in order to take on a new service and do things. And it's just amazing what Prabhupada did. I always like to give the example of, what's his name? The one who pioneered Germany, who went first? Starts with an S. Shivananda. Thank you. Yeah, Shivananda. I remember he used to live in Philadelphia. I lived in the same temple with him for some time afterward. But to go to a strange country where there's no Hare Krishna and start a center, pioneer there, And he went. Hamburg, I think it was. And probably because he knew German. He'd learned it in college or high school, And what do? Well, okay, you rent a little place and you go out and you start chanting on the street and you Xerox some things up and in German, you hand them out, you find some, And of course he found young people who were interested, because it was early on, in the hippie culture, the influence of the Beatles, the East India, was all over the place. And so he was successful. He founded that, and then from that people came who then became the leaders in Germany. He came back to America. So this was going on Prabhupada's order and request, because he was so revered and loved and respected, and you felt and then he would write these letters, and you get this letter, and that would empower you to do things. So this principle of authority that you surrender to because of the stature of the person and their elevation, and because this is what makes the Hare Krishna movement, as it were, Lord Chaitanya's movement, so strong. The more we accept that, not only for in a certain event or a certain act, but in the very daily acts of our lives. The chanting and giving up the four regular principles is a big surrender. And you say, how am I ever going to be able to do that? But you find that if you practice the sadhana carefully, and you're with devotees who are following, and you're chanting carefully, you get the strength to do it. And that builds on your faith. Well, I was able to do that. That's the hardest thing I've ever done. Following it. I'm still doing it, struggling a little bit, but I'm following. Then that means other things can also happen that are amazing. I mean, you probably know in great detail the whole beginning of book distribution in America. The Prabhupada wanted these books printed. The TLC and of course the Gita. I may have been. They just had the abridged Gita, I think, at first. Yeah, because, The Nectar Devotion was printed. So there were a few books, and they were piled up in the temples. What are we going to do with them? We approached a few books, we said, well, we'll sell them to the bookstores. Okay, we'll take a few on consignment. In other words, we won't pay for them if we sell them, like that. Which they were doing with Prabhupada's original books. And so that's, minimal distribution. They could sell a few, but to really get going, you have to go one-on-one. You have to have the devotee power. And who is it, Buddhimanta, who pioneered? They had some Krishna books, and the Krishna books were so beautiful. The large ones, so many of you have seen, silver with full color. And I counted, when in the 3-volume set, which I think was the first printing, there were over 100 color illustrations. Many of them quite crude. He didn't have that many artists that were good. Some of them were really pretty good. Jadharani was getting pretty good, early. But they were all with a lot of devotion, I mean, you can see the devotion. Almost some of them, oh my God, they come almost comical. How do you paint Putana, and all that. But Prabhupada loved them, and he said, oh, these paintings are just like windows to the spiritual world. And on the basis of those paintings, because no books are like that. So they were able to pioneer book distribution. Before long, devotees were going out, selling 10 Krishna books, 12 Krishna books, on and on. So it was all because of Prabhupada's desire. Everyone knew he wanted so much those books to go out. And when he got the reports, he was overjoyed, and he said, oh, double it. And so this thing happening. So it's almost like it's a universal principle. What's happening here, we see how, Brahma's orders, empowering Priyavrata, he's confident that, it's what God wants, it wants what my spiritual master wants, and he surrenders to it. So that principle of hearing the instruction of the spiritual master and taking it in one's heart and surrendering and making the effort to do it. In other words, just to make the effort. That's the idea, And once you find that, by making the effort, it becomes possible to do things you never thought possible. And that's really the way in which the movement grows and is sustained as well. Because we've been through some rough waters in even in this 50 years. But always, Prabhupada's orders and Prabhupada's lotus feet and things that we know to be true, and certain devotees who embodied that, and you trusted, and we've come through. The movement is still going and expanding, and amazing things are going on. So that's what we've just heard here. We're going to enter into another section now and learn about Priyavrata's activities. But the Bhagavatam, it gives us story after story like this that really we're meant to internalize the principles of. Like the other day I was telling someone about the principle, the story of Ambarish and Durvasa, and how there's so many lessons there. But Durvasa, I don't know if I do some of the new devotees, I'll tell this again. I learned recently what that name means. Did you know what Durvasa means? I always meant, because I didn't know Sanskrit so well, Durvasa, his clothes are far away. In other words, he's naked. That's not at all what it means. Durvasa means someone who's difficult to live with. When you read about Durvasa, right, he's always angry, right? Now, of course, he also plays an important role. He gave Kunti a wonderful boon and later, became important in the development of Pandavas. But it's like easily angered and easily pleased, I think. So Durvasa was not pleased that Ambarish, who was after all a king, in the second tier, he was a Kshatriya, and Durvasa was a perfect Brahman, that he was getting all this honor. Because Ambarish was a great devotee. Those verses, Savayamana Krishna Padara Bindiyo, he placed his mind on the lotus feet of the Lord, his words he used to glorify the Lord, his hands he used to clean the temple. It goes through systematically how every facility that he had, subtle and gross, he was using to connect to Krishna. So even though he was a king, he was pure exalted Vaishnava. In fact, as far as I remember, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that Krishna donated his chakra to him. Let's say he gave him access to that when he needed it, which is unusual. So Durvasa, he just couldn't stand. This is a perfect example of a materialistic mentality, despite all of his yogic powers and success. Is that this Kshatriya, who's busy with what Prabhupada would say, what does it say? Pence, pounds, shilling, pence. In other words, it has to deal with all these things, similar to what we're seeing here. That he could be so honored. Why should he be so honored? I'm, get all this, I have thousands of disciples, and I'm so austere, and I got all these powers and everything. So he figured out a way to put Ambarish on the spot. This came up recently because we have, like today, when do you break the fast? Or was that yesterday? Today. So, as we know, Maharaj, when he's here for the Mangalarti, he says that he kind of poo-poos it. He said, because Prabhupada never followed it so closely. Well, why did devotees ever think that was important? It's from this story of Ambarish, who was very strict with the Kadashi, and then he's practicing. He wants to break in the interval. That came up. We first learned about that when that came up, the 9th canto, I think. And so Durvasa comes to visit. He times it just right, that he comes just before that period begins. And the Kshatriya is this whole way of being very deferential to the Brahmins, great Brahmin like Durvasa, and you invite him for breakfast. Would you like to come and break the Kadashi fast, with me? Of course. Just let me take a bath first. So he stays in the bath until the period is almost over. Now we have a long period today, it's almost 5 hours. But sometimes we had, I don't know if you were here this time, Raj, we had it once, I swear, was it 1 second? Or was it simultaneous? Have you ever seen like that? Sometimes it's 5 minutes, And, yeah, have you ever? Oh, you were. Yeah, so I said, okay, everyone, I'm going to come out and take the halva. And then because we can't give then you have to pray for forgiveness for being outside at the time, 1 minute late. So there was some interval there, and it was expiring, and so he was on the spot. Ambarish was on the spot. So he consulted with his Brahmin advisors, but then he came up with the idea, as far as I can remember from Bhagavatam, I'll just drink some water, because water is breaking the fast and not breaking the fast. You can say, well, I did a water fast. Oh, you fasted, So he did that, and he thought everything was resolved. But this Durvasa, to show how difficult it is to live with him, he took huge offense, umbrage, to take umbrage, is this phrase you may not know, at this breaking of the etiquette and dining on water before your guest. So what did he do? Did he berate him? Did he chastise him? No. He pulls out a hair from his head and creates this kritya. And I looked this up. It's a female. Was it a bunch of hair? Okay, a bunch of hair. And he creates a kritya, which is a female fiery demon. Body's fire, So now you get this picture. Ambarish is standing there, a beautiful painting, and he's unfazed. Just as Prahlad is unfazed by all of these attacks. Just praying, chanting Hare Krishna, whatever, And the demon's coming at him. And the chakra, which he didn't call, but Krishna sent, comes, destroys the demoness, and then goes after Durvasa. Now, if Durvasa was really advanced, he would have said, come get me. To be killed by the chakra is very auspicious. But he didn't. He ran. Or let's say he started flying. He goes to Shiva, he goes to Brahma. He said, we can't help you. You have Krishna's chakra after you. He goes all the way to Vaikuntha. And I think the Vaikuntha planet in this is Dhruva Loka. And he falls down before Narayan and says, please, release me from your chakra. And then there's these famous verses, which I think you cited one, I forget the same, but the first one is, I'm not independent. I'm controlled by my devotees. Isn't it? And then there's the other one, which is, Sadhavogadiyam mayam, sadhunam madiyam taham, mananyatena janabi, naham tebyo managapi. This is the most famous one. I don't know anything but the sadhus, my devotees, and they don't know anything but me. No, I'm in the devotees' hearts, and the devotees are in my heart. And I don't know anything but them, and they don't know anything but me. So he's describing his intimate relationship with the devotees. But he's saying, if you want relief from this offense, you have to go back down there and surrender to Ambarish and get him to call off the chakra. And that's what he did. He went all the way back down. The chakra's chasing him, and there's a wonderful painting of him offering dandavats to Ambarish. And what did Ambarish do? He was the king. He was involved with pound, shilling, pence, but he was 100% surrendered to Krishna, and therefore he was empowered, just like Prahlad was empowered. There's a lot of power in defense also. This is why his father said, "Where do you get your power to defend yourself so easily against all my powerful attacks?" And Prahlad said, "From the same place you do, my dear father, best of the demons, from that Supreme Personality of Godhead." And that just enraged Hiranyakashipu more. The story, he hits the pillar and then he gets killed by Nrsingadev. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that in the course of our devotional life, we're faced with challenges, both personal in sadhana, and also in terms of our duty that we're given to perform. For example, I don't like it. This is not my swadharma. You remember how this used to come up? This washing the pots, this doesn't complement my psychophysical nature. Why is my temple president? He must be in Maya trying to engage me in this, The cave is a big that brings up a pastime, if you will. I remember in Miami, Vijay, you remember how the BBT was assigned to do the pots every Sunday? I don't know if you remember that. So we had 4 or 5, we had some ladies, but it was all the guys, And nobody was as spontaneously attracted to do the pots, but we accepted it as our duty, and we would go down. I think there were 3 or 4 of us. Grahila was there, and Dineshwar at a certain point. So we took it as an opportunity to do a big kirtan. We started kirtan. I don't think we were banging the pots in time, but maybe I was leading, whatever. And it was just, and after you threw, you had a nice kirtan and you've done your duty, and you feel blissful. Just like, to do any of these menial services. The menial services are I always love the menial services, because I could chant some shlokas while I'm doing them, and it's that. But it's very purifying to realize how it's just the mind. The mind is what's giving you all this, flack, and trying to convince you can't do it, you shouldn't do it, it's not your duty. But then if you find, my temple authorities want me to do it, and my spiritual master told me to surrender to the temple authorities, okay, so I'll do it, and I'll see how it goes. But if you actually make an effort to do it with enthusiasm and care and consciousness, then it becomes blissful. And you find that things that you saw as chores that you had to get through to get back to your Krishna consciousness are really an important part of the Krishna consciousness, and you make advancement that way. You become purified, and on a larger level, it's almost like Krishna consciousness itself, because we know there are so many do's and don'ts, right? I mean, I love those 6 elements of surrender. Anukulyasya sankalpa, patikulyasya varjanam, rakshissatiti vishwaso goptadvevananang tata, atmanikshepa karpane shadvadhashranagati. So the first 2 are like usually challenging when you first start, to accept those things which are favorable and reject those things which are unfavorable. But you find that a lot of those things that you have to accept are not, you're not spontaneously attracted to. It goes against your habits and everything. And the things you have to give up, I like those, but you give them up. I mean, the most obvious is, getting up early, taking a cold shower, Mangalartik, chanting the rounds. From an outsider's point of view, it's inconceivable. I mean, it's like, it's just like your guys are on another planet or something. And when you first come, maybe the hardest thing is the sleep. I remember reading Brahma when he stayed in the temple. This is what I think has to do with his book that the perfect question, perfect answers. He's describing how that came to be. How when he first stayed over, he said, "Why are they waking me up in the middle of the night? 4 o'clock, But you soon learn in the temple, this is the routine. This is the great value of the ashram, and before long it becomes natural. You find you can't sleep past the time. I mean, it's something that you want to do. That it's part of it. You're thankful that you've been acclimated to do it. So this is all the very auspicious process that we've been given. That's Prabhupada would love to say it's scientific. It's scientific, meaning that if you surrender to it and you make your best effort to follow, give up those things that are impediments and accept those things that are sadhana, that are seem inconceivable, then Krishna provides the power. He tesham satati yuktanam for you to actually succeed, and you can feel, it's possible, and you get the feeling that I can actually do this, and that's how this inconceivable movement is going on. The book distribution and the deity worship and everything else that's going on. And the more that we feel that the blessings of the authority, it's so important really to. This is one of the offerings. I go back to the Vyasa Puja book, and Anuttama Prabhu, one of our GBC, who's in charge of public affairs, we call it. He wrote this wonderful offering about the importance of really understanding and reviewing our understanding of Prabhupada's personality, not just in the official way, the founder Acharya and the source of the books, the author of the books, but also to read about all the struggles that he went through, that he accepted. I'm sorry, I said Did you keep in track again? I think I've been trying to reform. That he was praying like anything. I think Mula Prakriti, when she interviewed people who'd known Prabhupada when he was in Radha Damodar, my spiritual master has given me this impossible mission to preach Krishna consciousness in the Western world. How can I possibly succeed? And he tried in India, in the League of Devotees, in Jhansi. He tried to make it and enliven his family to do it, but every time he met a brick wall. He couldn't, do it. So finally, in 1969, he was 68 when he got on that boat. He turned 69, in our common way of understanding, 69 years old. His 70th birthday. This is something that is good for all you new boys to learn, is that the birthdays are counted different in India. When you're born, that's your first birthday. Makes perfect sense. And then when you're 1 year old, that's your second birthday. So therefore, Prabhupada had passed his 69th birthday, and he celebrated his 70th birthday, August, around Janmashtami, celebrated Janmashtami on the boat, if you recall. So that's why everyone says, he was 70 years old, but he was really 69. So that may come up as you read about Prabhupada. So it's a minor thing, but it's true. So, but still, 69, 70, it was a last. Prabhupada called it the fag end of his life. That he's trying to do this. So what was he impelled by? The order of his spiritual master, and the prediction of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that Krishna consciousness would be spread all over the world. And he was, he had the darshan, this is another pastime that probably relates, of Rupa Goswami when he's staying there in Radha Damodar temple. He said, you just write the books and you'll succeed. And he was encouraged in so many ways. So he took on what was, objectively speaking, an impossible task. So Mati Maharaji refused at first to give him a free ticket. You're just going to go over there and die, And anyone would have said, yeah, he has no money, he has no people over there. How's this going to work? So the whole thing is what we would call a miracle from outside. But what it does is it should inspire us that under Srila Prabhupada's guidance and his order, we can also be empowered not to do amazing things like Prabhupada on that level, but to do things that to us seem like miracles and amazing. And we add it all up with those thousands and thousands of devotees, it is supernatural. It's working on spiritual energy, not material energy. And that's what one of the lessons I get from here, is that Priyavrata, who thought it was inconceivable after all of this renunciation and brahmacārī and here with my spiritual master, no. Now you have to give that up, come down off the mountain, and manage the universe. Not forever, but for some time. And you will be empowered, not only to do that, but also to stay Krishna conscious. So that's what's going on here. Okay. In my mind, I've gone over time a little bit. Any questions or comments? Okay. Raj, please.
Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, Srimad Bhagavatam really expounds on the inconceivable circumstances or atmosphere of the Brahma Loka planet. If anyone wants to get more into it. There's nothing gross about it, like we have.
Right.
His body, for example, isn't like this. It's all intelligence. It's fine as any element of this universe. But I had a question on the, I have a question on, I'd never heard anyone say that because he's the smallest universe, smallest Brahma, that his 100 years is shorter than other Brahma's 100 years. Do you have a reference for that?
Did you ever hear that?
Do you have a reference?
We'll find it.
That would be nice.
He's encouraging me, so I'll just hit those keys and we'll get it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I should have this down by now, but I still don't. So here in the purport, when it mentions Brahmaloka, it's referring to the Brahman effulgence. But then Brahmaloka also refers to the actual planet of Brahma, right?
Yes, sometimes, yes.
So there's those two Brahmalokas. And then Satyaloka, so that means that one Brahmaloka is transcendental, at least is transcendental.
Yes, the effulgence, for sure.
Transcendental. And then Satyaloka, there's also a transcendental Satyaloka and then a material, high material world Satyaloka, or right?
I don't know. I think that Satyaloka just refers to Brahma's abode.
Okay, so only in the material world.
Yeah.
And then Vaikuntha is only referring to transcendental world. It's never referring to heavenly planets. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
100%.
Okay. The other thing I was wondering is, my understanding is that the word Brahma and the word Brahma and the word Brahman and the word Brahmana, these are all in Sanskrit just the word Brahma. And it's an editorial decision to make them distinct words so it's easier to follow. But like Brahmacārī, so when it's referring to Brahmanas, it's Brahma. And Brahma Vimohana Lila, it's not Brahma.
No, Brahma Vimohana Lila, that's a grammatical thing. Because it's compounded, the Vimohana, they dropped a long A. Just like I mentioned this thing, the Dviparada. I think the previous word ends with D, but they failed to see that D belongs to the next, the Dvi rather than Viparada. And it was just a transcription error mistake. So the Sanskrit is very subtle in that way. And I have never studied the grammar properly. I know a few things here and there. But the Brahman, Brahman, Prabhupada once said, Brahman means great. That's the basic meaning of it, the greatest, And it's come to mean, the Brahman effulgence, the greatest reality, the absolute truth that creates everything. And Brahmana are those who are the highest level, and their attention, they're meant to be focused on that. In other words, they're meant to be absorbed, a good part of the time, in cultivating their spiritual life and being absorbed with Brahman. But of course, today sometimes it gets corrupted, but that's the idea. But Brahma, you see, one of the things is like you have Bhagavan and you have Bhagavatam. So that long A indicates in relation to Bhagavan. Bhagavat, is a person, Bhagavat, the book Bhagavat, And sometimes we could confuse Vasudev and Vasudev. This is why long A's, those diacritics are really important. Vasudev is Krishna, the son of Vasudev. And then you have the Dhartarashtrans. It kind of gets complicated. Dhritarashtra, his sons are called Dhartarashtran. That word appears in the Bhagavad Gita. So I just heard a lecture where one of the people in the audience were asking Prabhupada about Brahma, and Prabhupada was talking about Brahman, and he was thinking he was talking about Brahma. So that confusion had to be ironed out. It's interesting.
You have something to say?
Go ahead, Buru. Go ahead.
Okay. So, my question is potentially controversial, but
it must be an editing question.
I was really appreciating your narration of Prabhupada's pastimes in the 1970s, and the miraculous things that were taking place during that time.
Mm.
And so, someone may say that it seems that that flow of mercy has been potentially dammed up because we're not seeing like those miraculous things that were happening on the level of Prabhupada. And sometimes people will respond, well, it's because Prabhupada's not here, but we also often hear that the Vani of the spiritual master is more important than the Vapu.
I hear that from Prabhupada, right in the books.
So why is it that we have this idea, or why is it that we're seeing this dam, so to speak, taking place, and how can we break the dam open?
Well, it's practically a law of nature that when the founder acharya leaves the planet, I mean, it happened with Bhaktisiddhanta in a much more dramatic way, that there's confusion. Because that his authority, and not just authority, but his presence, his person. Prabhupada was constantly traveling, practically till the final few months, and has such a powerful effect. Because we're not just talking about power; we're talking about love. We're talking about that's really the moving force, and that's nourished by personal interaction. Now, the more you advance, the more that you can feel that love and that empowerment, even in separation. And Prabhupada never stopped loving or respecting or being empowered by Bhaktisiddhanta. We know that. But for us neophytes, and it manifested. I mean, it was a period, and Rajendrananda will remember, and you may remember also in the 80s, when it wasn't at all sure that this movement would survive. There were a lot of things going on, and I remember one year, 85. Anyway, I'm not going to get into details, but it seemed touch and go for a while. And just to let you, just to illustrate that, one told me at one big meeting, someone reported that Jayawada Swami was crying because he felt, after this meeting that the whole thing was going to split up. We had different power centers and all these different things. So, why did that happen in just a few years? Because we weren't pure devotees, even the leadership, and it was so easy to become infatuated with the perks of power, so to speak. Being a initiating guru and having so many followers and who will serve you every word is a dangerous position, especially for someone who's not pure devotee. So, but the movement survived because there were enough sincere followers of Prabhupada who were ready to right the ship and do those necessary things so that it could go on. It was not at all sure that things would survive. But Prabhupada's strength and Lord Chaitanya's mercy and so many things, and sincere devotees, it happened. So that's the nature of the material world. Why does Krishna say, "Evam parampara praptam imam rajashya vidu"? That this knowledge that I'm giving you, I spoke it millions of years ago to the sun god, but due to the powerful force of time, mahata akala, it's become distorted and lost. Science as it is has become lost. So I'm now speaking it again. So it's just the nature of the material world that things degrade. And I mean, look at, read the 12th canto, the Bhumi Gita, the prediction for the rest of Kali Yuga. Sometimes the things that do we really have 427,000 years to go? It seems like it's maybe tomorrow this is going to happen. So that's just the nature of the material world. And our job is to learn what Prabhupada gave. He so much wanted us to read these books and understand them, meet together, systematic. This whole Bhakti Shastri thing, systematically, so that we have a firm understanding of the philosophy, and we can cite chapter and verse, because Prabhupada's present in his words, the Vani, and then follow the program, the authorized instructions and the what we've been given. And chant the holy name, and watch miracles happen. I mean, for me, TOVP is a miracle. I mean, I was there in '75 for one of the first festivals. Got very sick. Where do we stay? On the wall. We were staying on the wall. I remember only a few things because I was always sick. But it was. I saw that place, which I think they're preserving, where Prabhupada used to live, right near the gate. Yeah, and then for years we had all these gardens and fountains. A beautiful place, and that's the land. A lot of it where they're building that TOVP. It just, I mean, I haven't been in Mayapur for years, but even what had been built, some of the structure had come up to see it. Oh, this is bigger than anything ISKCON has done. Why? How does it happen? Well, it's not all Ambarish, but he was one of the moving forces, and give all that money. So these things, and that will provide a structure, but it has to be maintained by the people, by the devotees who will live there and manage that over the years, because that also can become, anything can be corrupt in this material world. So it's a struggle. But it's a glorious struggle to overcome our own weaknesses and to surrender and to become empowered, and to work together to maintain this movement on its even keel. Best I can do. Raj, can you take us home?
I'll try and be very concise. I wanted to share with you a wonderful quote by Srila Prabhupada that deals with this topic. He said, "Show yourself as an ideal Vaishnav. Then you are my representative in fullness. We're not after titles and designations." So someone who says, why is it bottled up? Why are there no miracles? People who have, whose heart is not open will not recognize a pure devotee sitting right next to them. Yeah. And they won't recognize, what are you talking about? No miracles going on. The devotees who are representing Prabhupada fully surrendered to him, people cannot help but fall in love with them and want to become like them and please them, with giving their life and soul. Rana Swami, Vaisheshika Prabhu, I mean, so many exalted Vaishnavas. And you see what takes place when everyone's working on the same goal of fulfilling Prabhupada's desires. Yeah. It's miraculous. Yeah. But if you want to think that, at my temple, or in my life, it's like you can just blind yourself to the reality that's just right there for entering into.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's so many wonderful centers where things are flourishing. We can get inspiration from there. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.
Thank you for a very inspiring class, Guru. Hare Krishna.
Hari Bol. Glories to Prabhupada.